everyone. You're listening to Polemics Report for February 11, 2019. This is your host, J.D. Hall. This is the program we hope will be glorifying to God, convicting to sinners, and edifying to the saints. A program with sincere questions and biblical answers. If you have a sincere question, you desire a biblical answer, email me, jd@polemicsreport.com. Now, this segment of the podcast is brought to you by the Reformed Gear Store. We're going to get all of your, what's it called? Reformed gear, t-shirts, hats, bumper stickers, things to make Arminians, drive them nuts. Where are you going to get that stuff besides the Reformed Gear Store? I don't know, but wherever you do, it's not going to be supporting Pulpit and Pen. So go to the PNP Facebook page, not the Pulpit Bunker, but the Facebook page, and click on Reformed Gear to get all of your, Reformed gear. This program is about polemics. Polemics is the field of theological study where we take what people are saying that God is saying, and we see if God is saying that and compare it to what God has already said. In other words, we want to know that if somebody tells us something, it's legitimate. So this is polemical theology, and so sometimes it's critical. Negative, I get it. But there's a purpose, and the purpose is to train the powers of our discernment with constant practice so that we might be skilled in the word of righteousness. Do you know what the gospel is? The gospel is that Christ Jesus died according to the scriptures, that he was buried, and according to the scriptures, he rose again from the dead. We've messed up. We can't save ourselves. We are all without our own righteousness. But by faith, we can actually take the righteousness that Jesus earned for us in his life, and in that exchange of faith, Jesus takes the sin of everyone who would believe in him, and he suffered the wrath of God on the cross and became our propitiation, meaning that Jesus became the wrath absorber for us on our behalf in a substitutionary or a vicarious atonement, and then proving his deity real and his sacrifice accepted. He rose again from the dead. That's what we're about. And we oppose any lofty thought, idea, or philosophy that raises itself up against the knowledge of God or would distract us from the mission of preaching the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ, that we can be saved not by what we do, but we can be saved by what it is that Jesus has done. And so we are Pulpit and Pen, the Rolex of polemics blogs, pulpitandpen.org, bringing to you the 5 news stories of the day. This one from Pulpit and Pen, again, pulpitandpen.org. Russell Moore defends Catholic celibacy in light of Baptist abuse scandal. And you might see where it says throw shade at James White. I'm going to hit enter on that and refresh it. Had our facts wrong. Somebody had sent me a message, and I had double checked for accuracy. But again, I had bad information. The tweet exchange that he got into James White with, let me back up for a second. The tweet that we posted in the article originally from James White was in response to Russ Moore. Russ Moore wasn't responding to James White. Sorry, we amended the title of the article and put in an editor's note that we're wrong, and whenever we're inaccurate, we aspire to do that, to say, if you notice there's something different about this article, this is what it is. I thought it odd that Russell Moore would condescend to respond to James White, but nonetheless, that's my bad. I want to discuss this article. Russell Moore defends Catholic celibacy in light of the Baptist abuse scandal. Let me get to this. There was a report by 3 different journalists writing this report together for the Houston Chronicle. And their names were Robert Downen, Lisa Olson, and John Tedesco. And they put together all of the abuse cases related to Southern Baptist churches in the last 20 years. And what they discovered is that there were 700 victims of sexual abuse done at the hands of those working with the Southern Baptist Convention, or churches that are a part of the Southern Baptist Convention. Now, I haven't seen anyone get into the facts of this, although I hear James White is going to be addressing it tomorrow. I hope he does. It's a dangerous thing to delve into this article to try to create a dividing line of truth, like where's the truth, where's the fiction, and then where's the spin, because spin can be truth, but it's it's spun truth. Like, the facts may be right, but how you're spinning it might be slightly skewed. So where's fact, where's fiction, and where's spin of the fact? And no one, I'm sure, wants to touch this, because the moment you say it's not as bad as you make it out to be, then all of a sudden you're defending child molesters. Who would want to do that? All right? And I'm going to the jail here in a little bit to do Bible study, and if they thought I defended child molesters, they would shank me to death. And so who wants to defend child molesters? Well, just a second. And let me preface this by saying I don't think there has ever been someone who has criticized the Southern Baptist Convention as much as me. I have every reason to continue to criticize the Southern Baptist Convention. So this isn't me defending Baptists or who I perceive to be the good guys. I'm the most vociferous critic they've ever seen. I just want to maybe cut through some of the rhetoric in that article to give us a finer taste of the truth. So, as the article in the Houston Chronicle explains, the number of victims that they found were about 700. They don't tell us necessarily victims of what, other than abuse. It could range from anything from child molestation to adult counselees who were taken advantage of by their counselors. If what they're defining as sexual abuse is truly sexual abuse, then it's horrific. But we don't know that because they didn't define it. When we deal with sexual abuse in the Roman Catholic Church, in all of the studies that I've seen, it's well defined as to what they mean by abuse. Chiefly the sodomization, is that a word? The sodomizing of young boys on behalf of priests or by priests. In this case, in the article in the Houston Chronicle, we're not sure how they're defining sexual abuse, and so we need to be careful with that. Secondly, the statistics of sexual abuse used in the article lump together abuse by different kinds of, lump together abuse both of clergy and volunteers. Again, when we look at statistics of abuse in the Roman Catholic Church, it doesn't take into account most of the time abuse at the hands of volunteers, but only clergy, priests. But this study in the Houston Chronicle deals with those who volunteer in Southern Baptist churches, Sunday school teachers. And when you start talking about volunteers in the church, that's not true. I was going to say all of our church members volunteer. That's not true. I wish all would volunteer, but it's a pretty high number. You're talking potentially millions of volunteers in the Southern Baptist Convention, and there's not a delineation between whether it's done by a Southern Baptist minister or just someone who happens to show up at a Southern Baptist church. Third, the article in the Houston Chronicle seems to conflate what Southern Baptist churches consider sexual misconduct with what the courts would consider a crime. And so they're taking into consideration pastors who were let go for sexual misconduct. That probably means something differently for a Southern Baptist than it does a Roman Catholic, but it for sure means something different for a Southern Baptist pastor than it means for a secularist. And so I think some of the survivor blogs reading this hear that X number of pastors have been fired for sexual misconduct. They're thinking child molestation, not necessarily pornography or an extramarital affair. Not that those things are good either. It's just if you're going to critique the SBC because of these facts and figures, know what they represent. And because of the unclarity in the article in the Houston Chronicle, we don't know. Now, of those 700 victims, that equates to about 220 officials, pastors, leaders, offenders who committed an offense that was actionable either criminally or civilly. So of 700 victims, only 220 individuals were prosecuted either criminally or sued civilly. which means my hunch is a lot of the sexual misconduct is what the churches would consider a sin grave enough to be disqualifying, but not that it would necessarily be against the law. Say, for example, an extramarital affair or an affair with a church member. Or can you have an affair with a church member? Just taking advantage of a church member. There's a power dynamic there that I'm not real comfortable with. Most troubling among the report is that about 35 or so Southern Baptist pastors were able to find jobs even after their sexual conduct became known, because churches didn't tell other churches. There was no matter of public discipline, and so it wasn't on the record anywhere. And least surprising in the article was its expose of various leaders in the SBC, like Jerry Vines, Paige Patterson, Frank Page, who have either personally engaged in sexual impropriety, like Frank Page, or helped to cover it up, like Paige Patterson did with Daryl Gilliard. So here are the facts that I want to cover. First of all, the SBC has approximately 45,000 churches. At least triple that of ordained clergy. You're talking about 150,000 Southern Baptist men walking around with some kind of license to preach or an ordination that you would call clergy. The list of Southern Baptist Convention volunteers is probably into the millions. In the course of 20 years, throughout 45,000 churches, more than 150,000 ordained clergy, and with millions of volunteers, there has been produced 700 victims in one form of another of sexual abuse. And of course, that is awful. Bad, tragic, terrible. I don't feel the need to signal my virtue to talk about how horrible that is. However, to put in perspective, this means that incidents of sexual misconduct impugn approximately 1 in 64 churches over the course of 20 years. Now, over the course of 20 years, 1 in 64 churches, 1 in 214 ordained clergy, and the ratio of abuse victims to volunteers is just incalculably small, all over the course of 20 years. And that's the church's standard of what constitutes sexual misconduct more than the government's standard. By the way, the church's standard matters even more. I don't mean to say it matters less. So regardless of whether it is a single instance of abuse or 700, it clearly is still tragic. But I want to compare this to Roman Catholics. A 2004 Vatican-sponsored investigatory report said there were 4,000 sexually deviant priests, not volunteers and not victims. 4,000 sexually deviant priests who molested more than 10,000 children, mostly boys, in the last 50 years. 10,000, 4,000 priests, not 220 who committed some kind of offense that would have them sued or arrested, but 4,000. A 5-year Australian study found, quote, tens of thousands of abused countries by upwards of about 7% of priests. 7%. In August of 2018, a Pennsylvania grand jury named more than 300 priests who had abused more than 1,000 kids in that state alone. 300 priests who abused more than 1,000 kids. In 2009, an archbishop acknowledged that upwards of 5% of Catholic clergy had been involved in sexual abuse cases. A perspective on clergy abuse by Catholic Dr. Thomas Plant of the Catholic Santa Clara University says it's approximately 4%. Now, there are only 37,000 Catholic priests in the United States, a much, much smaller number than there are pastors in the Southern Baptist Convention, and yet they have left tens of thousands of more victims than SBC pastors and volunteers combined by more than a power of 10 or greater. So tens of thousands, or 10 times, I should say, more victims than a much larger number of Southern Baptist pastors. And so there's no comparison in the instances between Papists and Protestants when it comes to sexual abuse. Now, what are we arguing about? I guess we're arguing about who molests kids least. What a pitiful thing to argue about. But there's something to be said for it. But by the way, before I get too distracted, I put this in here too. There's something that is coordinated with these newspapers publishing these big exposés that don't really reveal anything new. They're just a report on data that's already available publicly. It's not really investigative reporting, not truly investigative. It's more like a report than an investigation. And they did one on IFB churches as well. Not the Houston Chronicle, but the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And they found 412 allegations in 187 different independent fundamental Baptist churches. And as far as it's written, I think it goes back forever. And of these 168 churches, 45 men remained in their positions after the allegations were made. Which you got to say, and? I mean, unless the allegations are found valid, it's hard to determine if that's a high number or not. I'm sure some got through who actually were guilty, but you have to distinguish, which is something the Me Too movement doesn't want to do. You have to distinguish between allegations and actual substantiated offenses. It's really hard to number independent fundamental Baptist churches because they're independent, but some estimates take them as high as 40,000, which is about the number of Southern Baptist churches out there. I personally think it's higher than that. They're just under the radar and you don't see them on Google. And so compared to Roman Catholicism, the statistics among Baptists of the Southern Baptist variety or the IFB pale in comparison to that of the Roman Catholics. So Russ Moore decides to go signal his virtue and talk about how bad child molestation is. By the way, literacy is also good. And puppies are cute. And so always signaling the most obvious kinds of virtue. And I had originally thought, again, that Moore had responded to James White because what James had tweeted was republished in the Dallas paper on Sunday, but it was a republish, not an original publish. So James had tweeted this. He said, quote, "I am seeing SBC leaders calling wrong-headed the very right-headed observation that Rome's very unbiblical doctrine of priestly celibacy is very much a part of the problem. How can a reading Protestant not point to this unbiblical stricture as part of the problem?" Okay, and so Dr. White is making a salient point. It's a point that we've all thought, if we haven't said, and that is, maybe if you don't want priests diddling kids, maybe you ought to let them not burn with passion, but rather to marry. Just a crazy idea, because you can't compare the instances of sexual abuse in the Romanist Church with those in the Southern Baptist Convention. You simply can't do it. However, Moore writes in his editorial or op-ed, others have suggested that the church should not concern itself with questions of justice. Right. He's blaming the anti-social justice people. Okay. All right. No, we believe this. Killing child molesters after a lawful trial and conviction is actual justice that we can all get behind. Tom Askell, James White, Phil Johnson, John MacArthur, Michael Fallon, Tom Buck, Justin Peters, Vodi Bakum. We are all, I assure you, 100% for either killing child molesters or chemically castrating them or feeding them to wild dogs. Like, we're all for justice. It's just that you're lumping punishing crime, which is a matter of justice, you're lumping that in, or protecting the innocent, you're lumping that in with wealth redistribution from the haves to the have-nots, and this is a category error. Anyways, as you can see in bold here, Moore says, others have implied that the horrific scandals we've seen in the Roman Catholic Church are due to the theology of Catholicism, the nature of a celibate priesthood, and so forth. To which we say, yes, anyone in their right mind would point this out. But look what Russ does. He says, all of these are not only wrong-headed responses, but they're deadly dangerous. Deadly dangerous. both to the lives of the present and future survivors of these horrors and to the witness of the church itself. What? How is wondering aloud the consequence and ramifications of forced celibacy of priests for pedophilia and sexual abuse, how is that a danger, a deadly danger to lives of survivors and the witness of the church? How is it a danger to the witness of the... They're not, first of all, they're not in the church. We're the church. They're outside the church. You know, the whole Reformation, they anathematized us, we anathematized them right back. It doesn't hurt the witness of the church to criticize the Roman Catholic Church because they're not... And so I asked the question, did Russell Moore just say that questioning the role of priestly celibacy in sex abuse cases was a threat to the witness of the church? Unbelievable. So he's pointing his finger at Southern Baptists while at the same time defending the papists. Crazy indeed. Now, before I get to this post, actually, and we'll do number 4. Well, no, we'll do this. We'll do this one. Number 4. This is J.D. Greer, and I'll let you watch. Maybe.
AKA Whitney Houston.
So, we did a post at Pulpit and Pen. It has one sentence. God help the SBC, this is their leader. If that needs commentary, I can't help you. I don't want to provide commentary. The only other thing we said in the whole post was 2 Timothy 3, 2 through 3. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach, a husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, and respectable. And he is practically twerking on stage to a Whitney Houston song and then lip-syncing. Now, this was posted just a couple hours ago, and it's got 305 shares on Facebook, which is not huge for Pulpit and Pen. But that being the case, and by the way, here's a good case in point for the regular principle of worship. To go to our number 3 post, helping people escape the evangelical black ghetto. I thought this was, to brag on myself, I guess, I thought this was one of the better posts that I've written in a long time. And I'm going to talk about it on the program because after staying up till 11 o'clock at night to write the thing, it's got 42 views. I mean shares, 42 shares, which is nothing. It's garbage. And I told the guys today, I say, you know, this is so frustrating because we can post a video of J.D. Greer shaking his rump on stage to cheering women. I don't know if I should. I don't think it's a secret. Pastors can easily abuse their leadership when it comes to women and develop an unhealthy following among women if they're not careful and guarded. So J.D. Greer is doing his rump shaking thing, and if you listen to the video, it's all women cheering. There aren't men going, "This is awesome, dude, you go, bro." It's all the women who are like, "Oh, J.D., J.D., J.D." We can post that video. People care, something a little bit more substantive. Maybe it's too long to read, but here's the basic premise. Listen, the ghetto was a term that was originally developed in Venice in the 20th century to refer to those parts of the city that were forcefully segregated, at least through social ostracization, where Jews had to live. And then over time, in the last half century, that term ghetto came to imply a part of the city that was of a lower socioeconomic strata, and oftentimes, but not always, of a homogeneous minority ethnic makeup. And so you might speak of the black ghetto or the Mexican ghetto, etc. And that's where the term comes from. And there are different ways that governments have sought to change the ghetto experience, for lack of a better word. The left has taken a particular strategy of subsidizing housing in the ghetto to make it cheaper to live there, by increasing access to government assistance offices within walking distance of those neighborhoods. Their answer isn't to end the ghetto, and it's not to help people get out of the ghetto. Oddly enough, their answer is to make it harder to get out of the ghetto and easier to stay in it. Now, why would leftists want people to stay in the ghetto? Oh, single mother with 2 kids doesn't want to raise her kids in a gang-infested neighborhood. She should get out. Oh, I tell you what, we'll give you free housing. Just go ahead and stay here. Stay in this neighborhood. You don't want to leave. And then when gentrification happens, in other words, when there's actual, real, viable revitalization of the ghetto through capitalism and without government intervention, just natural capitalistic gentrification of a ghetto type neighborhood, they get upset because now it's more expensive to live here. Well, we should be helping people get out, not helping them stay. We've all agreed this isn't a good place as it is now, so let's get them out. And so Democrats offer incentives to keep people there in the form of HUD housing, government housing, welfare programs, a whole host of neighborhood-specific welfare programs that seek to allow every resident of the ghetto to feel comfortable enough in their condition to de-incentivize them from moving away from that terrible neighborhood. In other words, leftists have a vested interest in keeping the ghetto, and keeping the residents quarantined in the ghetto. It's not loving, it's pretty sinister. It's to quarantine them. They're building a virtual wall, brick by metaphoric brick, of government assistance programs to keep people down and keep them needy. Conservatives, on the other hand, when it comes to the ghetto, we have felt that our best solution to ending the plight of those therein is to help them get out by allowing the free market to do the heavy lifting. When the government doesn't take away our income through taxes to redistribute that to those who do not work, people are then free to take their paycheck and use it how they see fit. And so then there is incentive to work because you bring home more of your own paycheck by which you can better your life. Conservatives, for example, champion things like school vouchers, which would allow parents to send their kids out of the ghetto to a better school and give them a better opportunity away from their violent and illiterate neighborhoods. Governments have wanted to better individuals by lifting them up out of the estate. Democrats and leftists want to keep people in the ghetto because that's a voting bloc. But they're helping them, see? They're helping them with all that free stuff to keep them there and keep them voting for the leftist plantation. So in the name of liberalism, residents of urban ghettos are only more enslaved to the government plantation. Through the softened bigotry of lowered expectations, minority groups that are racially expected little of too often give little in return. On the other hand, expecting people to do better, regardless of skin color, will actually result in people literally doing better. When we view people when we view people how God intended us to view them, not according to their victimized class or subgroups, but as individuals made in His image, people give their best. We've always wanted to give people a hand up rather than just to make them stay where they're at and to be slightly more comfortable. Now, that being the case, here's my point in the article. Today there is an evangelical black ghetto that is just as real as the decrepit and decayed inner cities of Oakland, Harlem, or Chicago. There are reasons for why so few flee and escape the black evangelical ghetto, and it's for the same reason that economic subordination remains so dominant. Instead of viewing people as equal in the sight of God and therefore responsible for their own lives, it's more gratifying to subsidize ignorance and bad behavior. This only results in people remaining in their estate. The reality is that a great many black wards of the evangelical elitist class remain a permanent fixture in the theological underclass. So there are white evangelical elitists. These are like Tim Keller, Russell Moore, Albert Mohler. They've chosen their lot with the leftists. They've employed their strategies to help those who we all recognize have pretty messed up theology, which is the black church in America. I'm going to say it again. It has messed up theology. We all recognize this. Due to many factors that are historically undeniable, chiefly the infiltration of liberation theology that has given much of, not all, but much of the black church over to a fixation on social religion, gutting them of decent theology in the 1950s and 60s, there is a problem there. But instead of helping people escape the black evangelical ghetto, where there's little more than social justice or prosperity gospel, newly woke social justice evangelicals from predominantly white and wealthy demographics have helped them overlook personal responsibility and have de-incentivized their improvement of their own theology. And they've done so by promoting those figures from the black evangelical ghetto without requiring that their theology improve and get better. These include Eric Mason, Thabiti Anyabwile, H.B. Charles, Jackie Hill Perry, Dwight McKissick, Trilla Newbell, Anthony Bradley, Kyle J. Howard. These have all been promoted by the evangelical intelligentsia. They're the theological equivalent of limousine liberals, and they've promoted these people not for the soundness of their theology. If you know the Gospel Coalition, the ERLC, you know these guys, Albert Mohler, Ligon Duncan. These are astute guys. Tim Keller. They're not promoting Dwight McKissick or Jackie Hill Perry because they're astute theologians. I'll give you one hint why they're promoting them. And it's because of the color of their skin. To be a black evangelical is to have a golden ticket to notoriety and novelty. To the equivalent of receiving a race-based scholarship to an Ivy League university, not based upon merit, but based upon skin color. However, this approach will not help clear out the black evangelical ghetto. It will not help its inhabitants escape and to come out into something that is better and open-armed to those of different ethnicities, as the vast majority of evangelical churches are. No, it's to keep people there. Now, there are a lot of quality, darker-skinned brothers and sisters in Christ who make worthwhile contributions to evangelicalism, including Vodi Bakum and others, but they've never lived in the black evangelical ghetto that has been drenched in social religion and the prosperity gospel. It's time to promote those because it's time to promote the individuals that we promote because of their theology and not in spite of their poor theology, but because of their good theology. That's not happening in evangelicalism. Ultimately, like geographical quarantine of the inner cities, living in the evangelical ghetto is a choice. And freedom is just like a bus ticket away, man. You just got to move away from it because of incentives by Russell Moore and Tim Keller and others saying it doesn't matter what you teach. Like H.B. Charles at the Southern Baptist Pastors Conference, calling these black preachers like Tony Evans, who is an open theist, an Arminian, not an Arminian, a Pelagian, full-blown Pelagian, telling him, yeah, come preach at the Southern Baptist Pastors Conference. What, was it because he was an open theist, Mr. Charles, with your honorary degree from Master's Seminary? Was it because of his Pelagianism or his open theism that you had him preach at the Southern Baptist Pastors Conference? Oh, it's because of his skin color. Got it. You're making it easier for people to stay in the black evangelical ghetto. Number 2, Kyle J. Howard says the GOP is a party of white supremacy. I'll pull up the tweet for you and you can see it. Yes, the Democratic Party is a party of abortion, but the Republican Party is a white supremacist party. Well, there ain't no party like a white supremacist, but I'm just kidding. I rather not choose between poisons. I'll choose, if you give me a choice between someone being bigoted in one way or another towards race, or I should say ethnicity, socioeconomic strata, vegetarianism or diet, religious bigots. If you give me a choice between someone being bigoted, let's make it personal. If you give me a choice of someone being bigoted towards me or murdering me, I'm going to choose the bigot. So if you give a reasonable, rational person a choice between bigotry and murder, they'll choose bigotry every time. Let's stop at killing people. And he has the caveat, I'm not saying all Republicans are white supremacists, but I would encourage Christians to reassess their allegiances. We assess the allegiances, as he would say it. Listen, if forced between two poisons, it's not a difficult ethical question. There is zero doubt in the realm of Christian ethics that murder is a significantly more grave offense than racial bias. However, let's compare the two parties, shall we? The Democrat Party's infatuation with abortion. Consider the following baby-killing laws already passed or probably going to be. In New York, we saw the law passed that children could be murdered up until the time of birth. In Rhode Island, a bill to reinforce the right to abortion in case Roe is reversed. It's been reintroduced in the 2019 session and is probably going to pass because now there are more Democrats in the legislature. In Maryland, Democratic House Speaker Michael Bush is promoting legislation to reassure abortion rights again in case Roe is overturned by the Supreme Court. In Maine, Democratic Governor Janet Mills will likely sign a recently introduced bill that would require Maine to fund abortions that are not covered under Medicaid. Because when you kill your baby, it's not fair that you should have to pay for it. And it will probably pass because Democrats control both chambers of the legislature. In New Mexico, Democratic legislators who control both chambers are backing a bill that would remove New Mexico's criminal ban on abortion. It's a 1969 law that's not enforceable because of Roe v. Wade, but they want it removed off of the books anyway. Those are all Democratic bills actively seeking the murder of human beings. Now, where are all of the white supremacist bills of the GOP? Where are they at? Do you know? Is there a law anywhere in the United States that even tangentially reinforces the supposed supremacy of the white race? Where is the list of laws from the GOP that seek to diminish constitutional rights of minority groups? Where's it at? Don't know. What's he talking about? Don't know. It's Marxist nonsense. How about this one for the last news story of the day? Mom has a transgender reveal party for a 20-year-old daughter. I was at a baby shower just a couple years ago at the church. I felt obligated to be there, even though, as you could probably guess, it's not my favorite thing in the world. And they had a section or a segment of the baby shower that was the reveal thing. I think they cut into the cake and it had a certain color on the inside. I don't remember exactly. And I thought, this is a thing. And someone said, yeah, actually they're doing whole parties now designed to reveal the gender of the baby. Woohoo! All right. Like, your friends don't care that much. The woman's name is Heather Lundberg Green. And she says, when your child comes out as trans, the best thing to do is create a photo shoot to celebrate the fact that he silently and bravely stepped out of the race that he never wanted to be in, found his own lane, and proceeded to win. Now, I don't know how you step out of a race and win it at the same time, but it's not supposed to make sense. This is clearly a girl who wants to be a boy, and so she's a boy, according to her mother, for no other reason than she wants to be. So I don't guess it has to make sense. So happy birthday, Adrian. And so she had a gender reveal party for her daughter and posted photos on Facebook with blue balloons as part of a gender reveal announcement. The daughter pretends that she is a boy and is 20 years old. And Green, that is the mother, told the local news outlet, quote, everybody has reached out just saying thank you for this because it means we can celebrate. In other words, they saw them celebrate, so now they say, oh, we can celebrate. Well, if you weren't a mindless lemming, you wouldn't have to wait for somebody else to do it first. You could have done it, but, on your own. But, groupthink. My kid is a boy. When a parent says, I'm having a boy, you go, yay, congratulations. And this should be true even if they're 20. Well, it shouldn't be true because A, it's not a boy. B, you're not having a boy. You've already had the child and it's a girl. C, they're 20. Narcissists, I tell you what, you expect people to come give you presents too or send you cards? And Green's son, I should have said daughter, who has the surname Brown, explained that by virtue, somebody changed that, an editor. I meant to say Green. I accidentally misidentified the gender by agreeing with the child what their gender is. Green's daughter, who has the surname Brown, imagine that, came from a broken home. Who'd have thought? Explained that by virtue of Facebook likes, her gender is now sufficiently reinforced as male. So now that enough people have liked her Facebook pictures on her mom's page, now she is reinforced as a male. So you are apparently your preferred gender by virtue of Facebook likes. She says, since this post has gotten so much positive feedback, I felt like I can stand up for myself and say, this is who I am. No, actually, that's the opposite. It's saying, this is who I'm not. It's like when as this young woman is saying here, when a transgender person says, this is just who I am. I want to be who I am. No, who you are is a lady. You're trying to be a man. That is the opposite of being who you are. And all of your family and friends that are going, you go, girlfriend, or you go, boyfriend, whatever. You're not helping. Help them be who they are. Let them be who God made them to be. And how do they know who God made them to be? Check it out the next time you go to the bathroom. Are you sitting down or standing up? And which one is more practical? There. Fixed it. Fixed it. She continued, if you don't like it, that's fine. But you need to respect how I feel and how I want to live my life. And let me stop there for a moment and say, I will respect how you feel and how you want to live your life by not stoning you or asking you to be prosecuted for being a bad influence on children. So I have a level of toleration that could be described as respect for you as a human being, not to put you down like you were sick, but to try to get you medical treatment, which you need desperately. But here's the problem, she says. I want you to respect how I feel and how I want to live my life. And, here's the problem, and just use the right name and right pronouns and stop being mean for the sake of being mean. No, it is mean to God to lie about His creation. He has made them both male and female. The rub is that we disagree over what the right pronoun is. The right pronoun is the one that corresponds with who you are. And who you are corresponds with the way God made you. And the way you still are, even if you emasculate yourself or mutilate your flesh. You're still who you are. In reality, the most loving thing someone could do is not reinforce the gender dysphoria of the mentally ill. A study in 2018 by the American Academy of Pediatrics demonstrated that being so-called transgender causes adolescents to have a much higher suicide rate than the general population. So do you love that transgender friend? The transgender friend? Do you love them? Don't reinforce their psychosis, reinforce reality. I love you, but you're a girl. You're not a boy. No one's really going to think that you're a boy, even though you may get them to call you one or call you he or call you Adrian. You're really a girl. Everyone knows it, especially you. And so take time to stop and think about the God who made you the way you are. If you're listening on the Bible Thumping Wingnut Podcast Network. Support them. Check them out on the Wingnut Wall. Join our Facebook group, The Pulpit Bunker. You can support us on Patreon. Get free stuff. Books in the mail. $34.95 a month. $49.95 a month. Just $5.95 a month. Whatever you can do to help. And check out the GoFundMe for ungodlymessthebook.com Thanks for listening, and read the website tomorrow. God bless you, everybody. Talk to you next time. And until then, as always, Semper Reformanda.